Have you been zombified by love? Welcome to the Zombified podcast, your source for fresh brains. I'm Athena Actipis, psychology professor at ASU and chair of the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Alliance.
And I am your co-host, Dave Lundberg-Kenrick, media outreach program manager at ASU and brain enthusiast.
We really like brains.
We
love brains. So when we say brains, we want you all to murmur brains as if you're zombies. So we love brains.
Brains.
Perfect. All right, so whenever you hear a guest saying brains.
I also think since this season's about love, when they hear us say love, they should all say love.
I like that. Excellent. Yeah, so that's what this season is about, and that's what this episode is about. Undead Love.
That's
this
right.
is our season premiere, our launch episode, all in one.
That's right, because this season we have quite a bit about how relationships can zombify us. There's a couple of sort of main themes, I think, this season, right? And
one of them is definitely love, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about love.
I'm not trying to be over analytical, retracing time to remind myself how ugly this could be, but something else is taking over me.
So Zombified is about all the things that manipulate us.
That's right.
Yeah. And this season is all about love, relationships, healthy and unhealthy things, including both relationships and just like your own well-being as a human.
Yep. And different types of relationships. So romantic relationships and parent-child relationships.
Yeah, should we talk about some of the episodes that we're going to have in this season?
So. Grab
all right.
A little episode list.
So we have a awesome.
This is, which is this pill brain?
This is pill brain.
So this is interesting because this is about, so the things that we talk about this season are sort of how technology manipulates us, how our health manipulates us, and how relationships manipulate us. And pill brain is about how being on birth control can change people's personality. So it sort of hits at that intersection.
Yeah. If you think of drugs as part of technology, human technology, I kind of think of them that way. Yeah. Then this episode hits on all of those. And plus, Sarah Hill is a hilarious, awesome, fun guest whose idea of the zombie apocalypse involves organic arugula. So you're definitely going to have to listen to that one to find out more.
That's a good one. And so then we also have placental hijacking.
Yes.
So if you're not on the pill, you might end up with this, a baby coming right out of your brain. So
exactly. This is not actually a description of the biology of placentation. I just want to be clear. It's a metaphorical explanation. So David Haig is one of the leading theoretical biologists of our time. He's made so many amazing discoveries about how organisms actually hijack each other through sort of manipulating parental investment. Everything from plants to humans that are pregnant. Yeah. So in this episode, we talk about placentas, their biology, and how they actually can be involved in this hijacking process. And we also talk about sharks and shark babies.
But that general theme of how people in relationships sometimes have conflicting needs, that keeps coming up.
It keeps coming up again and again, yeah. And so, and this episode leads really nicely into our next episode because David Haig talks about this phenomenon called parent-offspring conflict, that you don't always have aligned interests with your offspring, and that's where you can get conflict happening. And the next episode, right after it, is
Mombi.
Microchimeric Mombi. So I don't know, do you know what microchimerism is?
Do you want to explain it?
I do.
don't wanna I didn't know there'd be a quiz.
A microchimerism is when a small number of cells go into the body of another individual. And this happens while a woman is pregnant. Some of the cells from the baby go into the mom, and from the mom go into the baby. And this can have all sorts of intriguing effects on maternal health and somewhat paradoxical effects on maternal health.
And does it have effects on personality?
We don't really know yet, but fetal cells have been found in the brain.
Interesting.
So they're there, they're expressing genes, doing something. So we speculate a little bit about what might be going on there. But so this is Amy Body, and she has a baby coming out of her head. This is also...
Is this an accurate
It's not
representation of how babies are born?
This is not how babies are born.
So, all right, well. So, all right. And then
Our next...
our next is Love Zombies. And
with Diana Fleischman.
Diana Fleischman, how people in relationships will use positive and negative reinforcement, sometimes without even knowing it, right?
That's right, yeah. So if you feel like you've been zombified by your relationship, whether for good or bad, or zombified by your child or even your parents, then this episode is definitely for you.
Yeah. Even if you don't know that you're being zombified, check it out. 'Cause maybe you're zombifying them. Or maybe you could be,
Yeah, or maybe you're so effectively zombified that you don't know that you're being zombified.
That's true. So
you better listen. Yeah. And we're lucky enough to actually have with us today Diana Fleischman,
So,
who will be our first guest for our live launch today. Diana. Thank you for being here with us. Okay, Diana, thanks so much for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Hi there. I'm Diana Fleischman, and I am a psychology academic, but I'm on sabbatical right now, and I might be going into science communication, and I'm writing a book right now about this idea. The book is tentatively titled How to Train Your Boyfriend. It probably will always be titled that. And it's basically about the idea that we evolved to use these kinds of principles with one another. So I've always been somebody who's kind of attracted to rebellious ideas. And when I was young, evolution was not taught in school, so I became obsessed with evolution. And then when I started studying evolution, behaviorism was really in my line, so then I became obsessed with behaviorism. And then I realized that there's a really interesting interface of these two ideas, which is that if we can learn through rewards and punishments, if we can teach anything from rats to pigeons to snapping turtles to do a behavior with rewards and punishments, how could that not be instantiated in some way in our ability to manipulate others?
So what would be an example in a relationship of how someone might use these sort of behaviorist techniques, the positive and negative reinforcement to change the behavior of somebody that they love?
Yeah, so I think that one thing that's very interesting is that we are not really aware of this, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. So one thing I'll say is that most of the time we're not consciously aware, and it's so interesting to me if you think about many of the greats in psychology have been people maybe on the spectrum a little bit. So people for whom mind reading was alien enough to them that they had to figure out how other people worked. And
so when you say on the spectrum, you mean on
like
the autism spectrum?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like people who are like, well, this is not obvious to me, so let me reverse engineer it. So I think that we're so close to this reward and punishment that we're doing to others that it's hard for us to be aware of it. And another thing is that if you look at rewards and punishments in the laboratory, the quicker they're dispensed, the more effective they are. And so one thing would be even just a look or a tone of voice change. Those things can be either punishing or reinforcing, and we're not necessarily aware that we're doing them. Scientists who look at facial expressions have noticed that there are tiny micro expressions that we dispense without even being consciously aware of those. And what are those if they're not, rewards and punishments and signals to one another? Another thing is that we spend an inordinate amount of time learning someone else's preferences and aversions, the things that they find the worst and best, even words that they like and dislike. People have strange pet hates in that way. And so why do we spend so much time learning that? I would argue that we learn those things so that we can use them, and we never know what things are going to come in handy. figuring out someone's particular repertoire of rewards and punishments.
So say you're in a new relationship and your partner does something that you don't like.
Yeah.
How would you train your boyfriend?
So one thing that you have to be really careful about is you have to first think about, why is it that this thing bothers me? So I'll tell you about a funny argument that I had. I was in the caves. What are those famous caves called in New Mexico? Yeah, that's right. I was in Carlsbad Caverns. I took a selfie with my now husband, and he looked absolutely miserable. And I was like, "Are you unhappy to be with me?" I totally lost it. And we argued for like forever because he can't smile in pictures. And then I realized that his inability to smile in pictures was universal. He always looks miserable in pictures. In fact, it's you have to tell everybody not to smile so it doesn't look like he isn't conscious. So I just taught him how to smile. Like, there's an Amy Schumer sketch like this where she's trying to learn how to smile for pictures. I just taught him how to smile, and now he knows how to fake smile like everyone else does. But he never learned how. And for me, it was like, okay, why am I so bothered by this? Why have we argued for an hour about this instead of enjoying, stalagmites or whatever we were supposed to be doing? And it's because it was a cue of divestment. It was a cue that he wasn't enjoying my company. And it was also thwarting my ability to show off how good my relationship with other people. I can't post a selfie where my boyfriend looks like I beat him. That's not cool. And so I think what's really important is to add an evolutionary perspective. Why do I have this desire to change this behavior? And instead of losing my mind, or like getting really angry with him for a long time, why don't I just spend 30 minutes teaching him how to fake smile? And so I think that's the main thing, is like you have to figure out what it is that's bothering you, and get to the source of that. How do you change that?
So then did you give him like pellets when he smiled successfully? How did you reward this?
Honestly, he's very, very sensitive to punishment. I can just like give him a sideways glance and he'll feel bad forever. And I think that's like actually a pretty good indicator of a good male partner, is actually someone who's quite sensitive to guilt. I mean, unless you're like somebody who's really over punishing, which is also a problem that my family and I do have. All the women in my family do. So I don't give him pellets. I just like look at the picture. I see that he smiled, or I look at him fake smiling, and I smile at him, or I tell him a joke, or I give him a kiss. Like, it's super easy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's very, very sensitive to both my like approval and disapproval. But I think that's what love is like just inordinate sensitivity to somebody's approval and disapproval, and gradually that gets desensitized. And there are also ways to kind of prevent that as well. Yeah.
So love is inordinate sensitivity to somebody's approval or disapproval.
Yes, love is when your brain is really sensitive to someone's approval and disapproval.
So real quick, you said there were ways to sort of prevent the desensitization. Are there any that...
So I think that, I've tried to find some literature about this, but I don't think that there's very good literature about courtship. What happens during courtship is that you spend all this time actually sensitizing yourselves to each other, to your moods, to your facial expressions, and you learn all this stuff about each other, and you have all this sex, and you like spend all this time together just inseparably. And I think courtship is usually a kind of a time-limited period of time, but you can do things that mimic courtship and also resensitize the other person to rewards and punishments. So, when they tell people to go on novel experiences together, those kinds of novel experiences mimic the kind of dopamine rush of courtship. And when you see somebody in a new light, like let's say you're spending time with your partner with new people, then you see different facets of them than you can bring out yourself. And that also piques your interest and is a little bit like a renewed source of courtship. But also, why are teenagers rebellious against their parents? It's because they feel like their parents are trying to manipulate them against their own self-interest. My parents are trying to keep me from having sex. Sex is the exact thing I want to have. So I don't know why they would do that, right? So there's this like rebellious period that happens. And if your partner gets the sense that you're manipulating them against their self-interest, or if you use rewards and punishments all the time, just like nagging. Nagging is basically continuous punishment that desensitizes you. The same way as like you've seen kids in the mall or whatever, like mom, 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 and then only when the kid yells does the mom respond.
Sure.
You're training the kid. You're training the kid to yell, and you're training the mom to become desensitized. The kids train the mom to become desensitized. The same thing happens with nagging. If you use the same like a low level punishment all the time, then the person will become desensitized to it. I just remember this because my grandmother is such an amazing example of this. She would just go on a tear at my grandfather for almost no reason, and he really loved to waltz. He loved to do ballroom dancing. So he'd hum a waltz to himself while he played with his cutlery until it was over. She would totally ignore him. And I just thought, like, she is really not doing what she means to do. She's getting all worked up. And, the whole purpose of that is being thwarted by him humming a waltz to himself. So it's a little bit like an arms race.
So she should take him on a vacation and yell at him there. Right?
Well, exactly.
Diana, do you have any special plans for Valentine's Day?
I do not have any special plans. I mean, my husband might have special plans. I'm just coming back from Arizona. I think that's good enough.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. I think we should have our next guest, Katina Michael, come on up. Thank you. So much love.
So, can I give a quick little intro?
Yes, please.
So one of the other things that we talk about, as we mentioned, was technology. And Katina is an expert on this, on how technology zombifies us. We should probably all say technology.
Yeah, Katina, would you introduce yourself in your own words for us?
Okay, Katina Michael, Australian. Grew up in Tempe, Australia, and now I'm at Tempe, Arizona. I'm in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, a cool school, may I add. And I also work in another cool school, the School of Computing and Informatics and Decision Systems Engineering. And I love all things tech and society. I don't think I have a favourite, and I try to see things from as many different lenses as possible. The thing that takes me close to tech is people. It's not tech, it's people. And how they connect.
And then we're getting into the love part of things. So, Katina, what aspects of technology intersect actually with this sort of connection and love and relationships the most?
I think it's the way we're using technology to bond. I recall a study that was done by one of our PhD students in Australia, and she looked at whether technology actually helps families come closer together or tears them apart. And what she found after observing about 8 or 9 families and their children and parents and whoever partners and extended family members visiting was that for dysfunctional families, computing and tech tears them further apart. For example, you might use the phone to make a voice call, and if the person doesn't answer, you'll leave a message, or you'll send an SMS, or you'll direct message on Facebook, on the wall. But if the family is dysfunctional to start with, no one replies. And so there's this distancing. Instead of it being a tool to come closer instantaneously to someone, within seconds, within milliseconds of pressing the send, it tears you apart. So if you've got a child who doesn't respond perhaps to your voice calls, you might try texting, and if they don't respond to your text, like come to dinner, and you're in the same house, and you've called out and they won't come, you might try getting into the instant gaming engine to send an instant message. That'll draw their attention, or use a bell.
Or just turn off the Wi-Fi.
Turn off the Wi-Fi. Actually, that's the fastest. You don't even have to confiscate tech. Just turn off the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Why Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
But now with other families, does it bring them together?
So where there is a strong bond, where there is love, it can act as an amazing tool for proximity. It's almost like this God view, this view, this innate proximity that's calling out to the Creator perhaps, or to Earth, whatever you believe, or to someone you love. And it's like this instant connection. And so I don't tell people don't send SMSs to people you love. I don't tell them don't leave, instant messages to people you love. Because actually, doesn't it feel good when there's this feedback loop and we feel connected, we feel loved. You can still say it. It's past tense, but you can still say it. But it's a reassurance. There's someone out there that cares for you and will do anything for you. And so some of us have routines. We wake up, we might send a text to our friend, a dear close friend. We might send a text to our spouse or partner, someone who's ill, a child. If they've had a bad day, the week before at school, you'll check up on them during the day. Are you okay? And that feedback loop, there's nothing more special than that. There's nothing, no man is an island. There's nothing more special than someone saying, I love you.
Love.
I've overdone it, haven't I? I don't mean to, but I, in this theme of undead love, that we're here today to talk about, it's like I decompartmentalized it, the undead, and that other word. And I thought about this thing of the cataphatic and the apophatic, and I'll be very simple. Cataphatic in theology is about things that you know of, their images, their symbols, their words. So you say to someone, I love you like the ocean, or I love you to the moon and back. And then apophatic is, I love you so much, I can't even talk about it. I love you so much, right? And you didn't say love. But one of my closest friends in the universe, in fact, apart from my husband and my kids' parents, an immediate family, sent me this beautiful piece last year by Nizar Kabani, forgive me, a Syrian poet, from the Boat of Love. And it says something like this: because my love for you is higher than words, I've decided to fall silent. And that's the apophatic, right? Because my love for you is higher than words, I have decided to fall silent. It's on the front page. Because I love so much that I can't even express how much I love you. It's and that's the unknowing. That's the apophatic, right? Yeah. That's the I can't find the expression in the universe to tell you that. And so you fall silent because you're sort of like your heart is gripped so much that you think, I can't even find the darn words, the earthly words. It's somewhere in here.
You just push that little button that has the heart.
Yes.
That's how you.
Not the Clover one.
Yes.
So, Katina, how is technology changing how people look for love or sort of find that connection?
I think we gotta drop this. We're not getting
Just
anywhere.
Just brains.
Yeah,
now.
just brains. Yeah. Maybe. So, amazingly, we've got so much tech, but we haven't been lonelier. We see this in student populations. Tech everywhere, screens everywhere. We spend between 11 and 16 hours on screens, and yet we're depressed sometimes, anxious and lonely. Why? Why at the time of the universe where we've had so much connectivity, we are so disconnected? And so many wonderful scholars have talked about that, including Sherry Turkle and so forth. So I'm not saying to you, Together Alone, her latest book from a couple of years back, what's going on here? Is it this blockage between us because we're using a medium that's not natural? Like, I'm looking at you, Athena, I'm looking at you, Dave. Your eyes are so important to me, and there's no screen there. There could be. I could put it like this, but there is a screen over there. Yeah. But it's like we're seeing through each other. We're not looking at each other's eyes. I did an exercise in a class, a Barrett class here at ASU, and Professor Greg Zachary asked me, just come in and do something, and I said, okay. So I listened to him for half an hour. And then I decided to do a simple task. I said, students, you're some of the best students in the United States. Drop your books, go into pairs, and look at each other's eyes. 2 minutes. People were doing this, they were this, started to talk but not look at each other. We can't do it anymore. Why? It's the most beautiful, most powerful, most empowering, most incredible thing. And I'm worried that we're seeing through each other with this. It's great for when it works, but if it doesn't work, we've forgotten what it feels like to touch. It's all right. And I've been on planes where people have shared some of their stories with me their marriage discussions. And they said, we feel so distant. We're in the bed, we're texting each other, we're on the laptops. We're not sharing the intimacy. People have stopped making love. People have stopped having kids. People have stopped touching. I'm too tired because of the messages. So we need to reorient. How can we put this thing in its place? How could we do what you were talking about with relationships, but with this? Because you know what? Studies have shown that we have a deep affection for this and that we can't live without it. It's Apple's satisfaction survey with Apple iPhones. Deep affection, separation anxiety. But we don't have that with people. If we lose this, we freak out more than if we lose our kid. Right? Think about it. Think about it. It's true. It's true. It's true.
It's an interesting example of the proximate versus distal reinforcement. If all your social reinforcement is immediate, coming from here, and making plans to have lunch with a friend takes an hour, then what's the easier way to get reinforcement, even though that's not nearly as good or satisfying?
It's like that game of Pong. It was the 1970s game on the Atari. I hit a shot, the shot comes back. So you're using a striker, and the ping pong ball is coming back and forth. And that's how we are. We're almost going into this endless feedback loop where we send a message, we expect it back. We send another message. We complain that the more messages come back, but we send another message. And what we've done is we keep halving the lifetime of the messages. So to what point before we start to break down and go, I have no more capacity to keep playing ping pong all night and all day with work, with family messages, with government, what do we call it here, IRS? But all those fake calls that just keep calling us, the robo calls, right? Mm-hmm. So we're over it, but we don't know how to change.
So Diana, how does this tie in with sort of the reinforcement that we're getting from technology?
Your phone is everyone you know, not just one person. So it's almost like a dollar as opposed to like an object, right? It's just a universal currency of socializing, and it's also more immediate. So it works on behaviorist terms, and I know people who've done things to make their phones less reinforcing to try to circumvent this. I know somebody, his phone's black and white. He takes the color off his phone 12 hours a day. It's amazing how much less reinforcing your phone is when it's in black and white. Or there are people, I use these tactics myself because when I get on social media, I haven't been on Facebook for 2 years, not because I don't love it, it's because I love it too much. I find it really addictive. And partly there's some apps that you can buy, and they just increase the lag. It takes 30 seconds for Facebook to load. It's amazing how much less reinforcing these things are when they take 30 seconds to load. And you could try and rejig things such that the reinforcement from engaging with people socially directly was faster and better than engaging with people through messaging. But it's also hard. It's a lot easier to say something with an emoji than it is to speak with somebody. And it's not just because we've been growing up around phones. It is objectively easier. I think.
It is. Yes.
We should just carry emojis around. We'd just be like, that makes me feel like this. So, then we don't need to talk.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, Katina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And welcome to Zach Compton, our next guest.
Zach.
Yes.
Give one too. It's all love here.
All right, Zach, would you introduce yourself in your own words for us?
Sure. My name is Zach Compton. I'm a first-year evolutionary biology PhD student here at ASU in Carlo Mealy's lab. And I've never been less excited for a book to come out than Diana's book. Just a couple weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were driving back from a trip, and we had a really good time, really got along. And we're coming back into Phoenix. She said, "You really respond so well to negative reinforcement." And so this whole time, I think we've had a great relationship, and I'm just responding.
It is what a great relationship is.
So you're in a special relationship now?
I am. She's here.
Hi. So do you have special plans at all for Valentine's Day? Or can you not say because...
I cannot say, but you and Carla are on the same wavelength, so you can see a crested cactus from there. That's where the dinner is.
Oh,
So
very nice.
I'll let you guys go on a scavenger hunt this weekend.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Excellent. And would you say that you're zombified by by love in general, or are there specific aspects of love that zombify you?
Apparently, because I'm just operating, oh, things are going really well, and she's seeing it as, oh man, he's so well trained. And so apparently, I'm learning something today that I am a little zombified by love, in a good way, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I guess that's the foundation of a good relationship.
Yeah. Are you happy?
Apparently. I thought I was. Maybe that's just the right mix of chemicals, though.
You should probably get the book first. I think. Pre-order. So.
Diana, is your book just for people looking to train boyfriends, or more
Can it go both ways?
general?
I talked to an agent. She wanted me to make it like How to Train Your Partner. And do you remember Neil Strauss's The Game, which is written for men? I actually know more women who've read that book than men. And so I think forbidden knowledge is a certain kind of appeal. And so but I also think that in the current climate, How to Train Your Girlfriend would not sell.
I'll have to buy it and put one of those paper covers over it. Staple the Bible.
So Zach, have you had the chance to listen to some of those episodes of Zombified that are about to launch?
I did, and I won't ruin an entire episode like I did at the last log. I've paced myself on the information I'll release.
Which one was your favorite so far?
So in the past couple of months, just because of the way my research has gone, I've been just captivated by the freak show that is shark physiology and anatomy. And so it was really cute reading about how the baby sharks will eat another egg, and the mother will continue to release eggs, so the baby has something to eat. And then I read the transcript a little further, and sometimes they start developing in an embryo, and the other twin will just eat the baby shark. I was like, less good, less fun. It's just like eating a little egg breakfast, but it was really neat.
Bring some new meaning to that baby shark song.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, Zach, thank you so much for being here with us. Jessica Ayers. Jessica, welcome. Welcome to Zombified. Would you introduce yourself in your own words?
Yes, I am Jessica Ayers. I am your zombie. And I study the behavioral manifestations of genetic conflict in humans.
What does that mean?
So, if you listen to Amy and David Haig's podcast episodes, they will explain it much better than I do. But basically, think back to Biology 101. There's eggs, there's sperm, they make a completely new human, and that's actually not the way it works. Genes from your mom and genes from your dad are always battling it out during your development and across your lifespan. And so I study basically how that inherent conflict actually is expressed across the lifespan.
How does it get expressed?
So we have some stuff about pregnancy eating behavior and how pregnancy eating behavior is actually potentially a manifestation of genetic conflict. And so we have some pretty cool suggestive evidence that we can predict potential pregnancy complications from this eating behavior. It can manifest in family life. I think it manifests in attachment strategies that people use across their lifespan. We have some stuff about how relationships with genetic kin versus non-genetic kin might be influenced by this kind of conflict.
So the in-laws versus your family.
Oh my God. So
you have a story for
I
us?
have a story for you. I really hope my mother-in-law is not listening or watching. She knows. She just hears me talking about her. I love her. Let's put that out there first. So I presented a poster on our stuff about how mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law don't always get along, and we have some suggestive evidence that that's the case. And she might have read the entire poster. She might also bring it up every time she sees me because she finds it so funny. So funny. I'm pretty sure my husband's entire extended family knows that I did a poster on why mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law fight because she finds it so funny.
All right. So, but you guys love each other.
Yes.
Well, and that's really all that matters because you have conflict, but if you have love underlying it, then...
She also has a dog.
Okay.
So, there are a lot of perks of having her for a mother-in-law.
Excellent,
Nice.
excellent. And Jessica, do you have any special Valentine's Day plans?
Not really, because my husband and my anniversary is actually 2 weeks after Valentine's Day, so our entire relationship, we've always celebrated that as the big thing. We normally watch slasher flicks on Valentine's Day.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'd like to invite you guys to tell us, all of you, a little bit more about anything about your own relationships that is sort of, potentially relevant or interesting for this discussion of zombified love.
Sure enough, it's your turn.
I can give you an example of how zombified my husband is.
All right.
So I am insane. Apparently, the way that I cope with graduate school is by adopting pets. So I moved here and I had 2 cats. Since then, we have added 2 dogs, a hamster, 2 mice, 2 fish, 2 snails, 2 frogs, and a bunch of ghost shrimp.
Do you have an ark?
Maybe.
Is there anything we should know,
Maybe.
weather-wise?
I mean, I'm not saying that the apocalypse is coming, but maybe my house is a safe place to go should it come in. Yeah.
So you're really zombified by pets.
Yeah.
So
Really zombified.
And
by
so
pets.
is he zombified by pets, or is he just zombified by his love for you? And so then
It started with his love for me. The dogs completely zombified him. The cats completely zombified him. Oh my god, him and those stupid mice are obnoxiously cute. And every morning he wakes up and walks over there and gives them a treat. And the mice are assholes to start with. I have never known a sassier animal than a mouse. So we give them a treat, and if it's not the one they want, they smell it and they go, and then every morning, without fail. The only thing he hasn't been zombified by are the aquatic animals, and he has said, you are on your own. This is all you. I am not involved.
I just wrote a chapter about animal ethics and evolutionary psychology, and some of the people at University of Portsmouth have done things about dog behavior and how dogs zombify us. And so the one thing that's really interesting is that dogs can do this thing where they have this muscle here, and they can raise one eyebrow, and it looks very much like what a kid does. In fact, this is gross, but if you dissect a dog's face, they have more facial muscles than a wolf does, and they can make more kind of what they call pedomorphic, childlike facial expressions. And so dogs who can make this very sad face, they tend to get adopted much faster than dogs who can't make this particular face. And so you just have to think about, it's just unbelievable how much dogs kind of influence behavior. And in this paper, I was also writing about how people love dogs that have serious health problems. So, pugs and King Charles Spaniels and bulldogs and things, they have their brachyscephalitic, I can't remember if that's exactly the word, but they have these short snouts, which means that they fart all the time and they die in the heat. Dog, you have one job, and that's not to die just randomly. And they do, and there's this one study that said that people who have dogs who have these short snouts, any of all these health problems, they feel closer to their dogs. And so this actually reminds me a lot of codependent relationships, is that actually many people love people who need them, and they actually really reward behavior that would objectively seem like it's no good. And people do the same thing with dogs, is that they're rewarding the behavior that means this dog's not attractive anywhere else, like farting, and this dog would die without me. And so it's weird, because you would think that people would be reinforcing their kids and their partners for showing independent, self-sufficient behavior, but really the opposite is true. We often reward the worst and most codependent kinds of behaviors in others, and our pets and our spouses and our kids.
But do people like it when their spouses fart?
Some people do. No, but people do like it when their partners. I was actually looking at alcoholics. So some clinical psychologists try and train the spouses and families of alcoholics in behaviorist techniques to prevent them from drinking or engaging in other kinds of sabotaging behaviors. But the interesting thing is that a lot of people are rewarding their partners for the behaviors that start the drinking, or even the drinking itself, because it means that they rely on them. They're sloppy drunk and they can't, or that nobody else will want them. And so we might not be aware of it, but actually what we're doing is trying to make it such that other people are dependent on us. And the last thing I'll say is, you were talking about watching slasher flicks on Valentine's Day. There's this concept that I'm working on right now, which I call weirding. And it's about how we try to make other people more unusual in the same way that we are, so that we're more singular to each other and that we're less replaceable through other people. And so if I can weird somebody, if I reward them for expressing similar interests in me and similar preferences than me, then I can make myself less replaceable.
That's really interesting.
It is really interesting.
So, Diana, can I ask, how does that relate to like different sort of relationship patterns, right? Because I know that, you know, if you have a monogamous relationship, then potentially it might be more important to kind of have someone who is just for you versus if you have a open relationship or a polyamorous relationship. Do you feel?
Well, since we got married, we've been like disgustingly monogamous. But I will say that we are the polyamorous professors. Me and my husband are, and we have talked about this quite a bit because you know how I was talking earlier about extending the kind of process of courtship, extending that. Actually, when you occasionally see other people, that does that, actually. So it's very easy when you're monogamous and you're irreplaceable to each other, and when all the social norms and things say that you can't leave each other, that you stop trying. Because really, if you think about it, we expend as little effort as possible. That's why exercising doesn't feel great. It's because sitting on your butt feels awesome, because we are designed to expend as little effort as possible in every domain, including in the mating domain. So one way you can remind yourself, like on Valentine's Day, to take care of each other and be kind to each other. But if there's active competition, then actually it makes you treat each other better. And we just like to sprinkle a little bit of that in, definitely. And so that also makes the other person more reinforcing in the same way that a toy is much more attractive if somebody else plays with it. I mean, that's just going to be your favorite thing. Even dogs do that. And so you have to think about, the reward and punishment are not just kind of in a vacuum, but they're also contingent on how the social cues you're getting about how valuable someone or some behavior is.
So you guys are the polyamorous professors.
Well, there's a video about us like that. Yes. I mean, it's so funny because people are like, "Oh, you're really wedded to." We're not really wedded to this idea, and
so to speak.
But I do think that it is something that we think should be considered, and it's also, I think, more stable than some kind of hardcore monogamy. I think it's somewhat more stable. It has some more flexibility to it. And Esther Perel and many other people have talked about this recently, in that if any kind of outside interest is a total betrayal, or if our narrative about love is that if you're only interested in one person, in love with one person, I think Jeffrey Miller, my husband, did a poll on Twitter, which was like, how many people have you been in love with? And everybody said one, because I think the society accepted answer is that anyone you were in love with before your current partner doesn't actually count. You're only really ever been in love with one person. And so I think that if we had more flexibility about these various ideas, it would be better. But I also think that if we added a little bit of outside interest, or added a little bit of seeing our partner admired by other people, thinking about from an evolutionary psychology perspective, we were talking about this with phones, but also how unusual is it for us to live in an environment where you never see anyone else admiring your partner, you never see anyone else chatting with them or flirting with them, you never see them, like let's say you have a husband or a wife who's really high powered where they work, but you never see that because when they come home, they're just the person who does the dishes, right? Or does the laundry or whatever. In that context, if you never see somebody being admired, then you can't value them as much as you maybe should. And so I think that adding those elements in, whether it's through some kind of openness, or at least through seeing somebody in the context where they're most admired and most valued, can really help a lot in not taking each other for granted, and help find that other person more rewarding.
But you said that things have changed a little since getting married.
Well, I've moved to a new place. It just seems like a lot of work to date new people. The main way that I kind of I like to do polyamory is because when you break up with somebody, you spend all this time getting to know somebody and learning about them and meeting their family and stuff, and then you break up with them and then you forget all about them and you never talk to them again. I think that's terrible. And so one of the main things that we do is that I am in touch with and sort of semi-date everyone I've ever dated, basically, still. And that way I feel like I'm not like so dismembered, to use a zombie word, from all my previous previous phases of my life, and it really bums me out when people break up and they're like, oh, that was a total waste of time, or that was 3 years gone, or whatever. I'm like, no, there was so much stuff that you might have learned, and if you completely detach yourself from all that because of this narrative that you have one person and one person only, I think that's really, really sad.
Interesting.
Can I share?
Yes, Katina, please.
We're almost chalk and cheese.
Good.
Not from the perspective of listening to your thoughts, I think are beautiful with respect to how to respect each other and how to keep that light happening. For someone who's only ever kissed a man once, inverted commas, my whole life, actually, the only person I've ever kissed is my husband. Married at 18, been married for 25 years, happily married.
That's awesome.
But I'm not going to say to you, it's been easy. I'm not going to say to you that, actually, I've never thought about somebody else. Just keeping the blinkers on, and I focus on this beautiful person, that the mystery of love. You look into their eyes, and it's unending to me. I find so much vitality, so much rigor in him, that every day I tell him I love you. And he says to me, do you know what? There's no one else I could ever even think of next to me in my bed. I go to sleep happy as a person, happy, content that I have the person I had to meet. But maybe that, and it's not to say to you, I don't tolerate your.
No,
each unto their own journey.
Absolutely. I think monogamy, I think that kind of thing where you've
Yes.
grown together is really beautiful. And I do think that some of the traditionalists have it right. I'm 38. I was 38 when I got married. That's really late. In some cultures, you might as well be in a nursing home at 38. You're never going to get married. And so that's a really long time to date. And there's this awful thing that traditionalists say, that women are like a piece of tape, and the more you stick to somebody, the less sticky you get. But I do think that I fell really hard in love with the person I fell in love with when I was 16, and we had literally nothing in common. And I wouldn't even talk to him for 5 minutes today if I met him. But I was receptive in a way that I am not anymore. And so I think that it was really good that I spent all that time dating, because I'm really compatible with the person I am with now, because I couldn't attach to somebody I wasn't super compatible with. But if you are somebody who meets at 18, you can grow together and you can become attached in a way that I think that
he was 32, so so that's a different story altogether.
I think men fall in love. I think on average,
Yes.
men fall in love differently than women do. But I'll just say that I do think that if people meet young, and this is why traditional societies really, really encourage this, is because you are less, if you talk to people, and they're, especially in New York or something, women in their 30s and 40s, about who they want, they have to read the right kind of books and like the right kind of wine and drive the right kind of car. Whereas, when you're 18, you can just look in somebody's eyes and fall in love. And I do think that's something that people don't really talk honestly enough about, is how much easier it is to be zombified when you are young.
I agree with that. I agree with that. A lot turns into your brain. The older you get, you think more. I was always a very reasoning, logical person. I didn't date my husband before I said, yes, I'm going to marry you. Right? The most illogical thing I've ever done. I thank God it was the right thing that I did, and that we've lived happily ever after. But it was the opposite. You said, have I ever done anything romantic? That was the opening question. I think the precursor to the show.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy,
crazy.
right?
Yeah.
Crazy for love. Well, imagine going to a high school reunion, seeing your teacher he hadn't seen for 4 or 5 months, walking down towards his old restaurant after the school reunion because your lift didn't arrive. And as you're walking, your then ex-teacher, who happens to be your theology teacher, says to you, have you ever been in love? And you say no. And by the end of that trip, 2 kilometers down, you end up engaged.
Wow.
And on my 25th anniversary on December 13th, I was at Sydney Harbour. We had celebrated 2 days before when I went back to Australia. And I thought, I have to write this story out. And I pounded out 10,000 words in about 2 hours. And then we compared notes. Did that really happen? Do you remember that? Do you remember that we almost got killed crossing the road to the church? beep, before that big proposal. But it was like, that was life-changing. And you think to yourself, how was that orchestrated? How was that crazy? That was the craziest thing. I think everyone thought I was going to become a nun. Seriously. The last person who was going to get married is that girl who's got the scholarship and wants to do theology one day. But it happened. And I just still can't believe it. It's a miracle. I still think my marriage is a miracle. And many of us have these amazing collisions. At the least time you expect, and you think, you? like you're the one that I was destined to marry or to be with as a partner or to love. but I share that with you because here you have two stories, seemingly opposite, but the same binding connection is that this joy of not only wishing to spend the rest of your life together, but perhaps offspring, perhaps looking after animals and pets together as a unit, perhaps sharing. And I'll tell you my favourite passage. The most amazing thing about that word, love, is that you can give it away as much as you want. And guess what? It doesn't diminish like money. It increases. And St. Augustine, who was a depressive at one stage, fighting his sins and fighting himself in the city of God with his autobiography, at the end he basically said, love is the only thing that counts. You can give it to someone freely. Don't sit there hoarding it. Give it, because you're just going to increase the love in the world. It's back to your human generosity projects, Athena, that I love so much. What's the problem about being generous? What's the problem about being happy for the partner more than we are for ourselves, In fact, who isn't happier for their loved one more than they are when good things happen to them?
Well, you're sounding a little polyamorous right now.
Thank you. I love that. I love the commonality. I love it, Diana.
Well, I would love to open up for the audience. Do you have any questions for any of our guests? You can raise your hand up, and Dave will come on over to you.
Working.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyone have questions?
Questions for our
Let's
guests?
rephrase it. You definitely have a question.
Who has a question? All right.
So I am very concerned by the way that technology is zombifying us, particularly the phones. And so Diane shared a few ideas about reducing at least the feedback addictions. But I'm wondering if you have other ideas about how to, in terms of how technology is influencing us, our society, what are the good solutions to that, or what are good interventions that you would like to see done or is being done? Both of you.
No. I mean, I don't know firsthand because I don't know people who work at Facebook or Twitter or any of the other ones. But I do know that they try different things out. They do A/B testing. I've heard, for example, that the gap between when you load Twitter and when it shows you how many notifications you have is actually a behaviorist design. It builds up some anticipation before you see that dopamine hit of like, oh, 10 people have mentioned me or liked my tweets or whatever. It's so exciting. I don't use Instagram because that would probably just blow my mind. But yeah, I wonder if you have any ideas, like, if you could have a program on your phone. Now your phone tells you how many hours a week you spent on it, which is uniformly horrifying.
Yeah, so many different solutions. It's a great question. We're all struggling with it, even me. Some physical things. Don't have your phone with you in the kitchen, in the car, in the bedroom. That's really tough because that's where people talk to each other. You pick up the kids, yep, right, in the car. Or you go to sleep with your spouse or your partner, or you put your kids to sleep. Don't have it in your pocket. And in the kitchen, it's a sacred space where you're cooking. Often when I've cooked and I haven't had a chance to run and throw the phone away somewhere or put it in a bag, the kids will hear the ting. And they say, Mommy, a message. And I say, don't worry about the message. We're together now. That's it. So there's a physical sort of behavioural thing. Turn off your notifications. Pavlov's dog, right? Ting, ting, ting. And then what happens after a little while? People are doing this and it's not even tinging, right? It's this natural, I'm at the bus stop. I'm in between the lecture, I'm waiting. In fact, resist the urge, talk to the person, go to say, Josh, how was your day? And that's also hard. Turn off the notifications. I would say you could, self-regulating software, like a company I was an ambassador for in Australia, the company is Bugbean. It had 11,000 downloads of its app in the first month. And it was the highest rating app in Britain for a short time, even though it was an Aussie app. And antisocial, it lets you set barriers. There's nothing wrong with Facebook, right? If it's 30 minutes, if it's an hour, if you use it for your work, 20 minutes, whatever it is. People have a big problem, particularly in the workplace. Pew came out 2 years ago by saying 20% of the time to 40% of the time people are on the internet at work is non-work related stuff. That's a problem. Productivity dips. We see that with our young people who are coming into consulting firms. In fact, partners from some of the big four have said to me, Katina, it's the 17 screens are open and nothing's doing. Right? All these screens, and then the work turned into the boss or to the academic or to whomever is not even a page. It's sloppy, and you think, we've lost face. We don't even realise that this is not credible anymore, right? There are other things like removing the app completely if it's bothering you. And we see this in times go up and down. It's a peak and trough. Some of our young people particularly are suffering, particularly girls. Women are more susceptible. It's been proven by all the Facebook addiction scales, the South Korean addiction smartphone scales. There are now different scales for different things. And so if women are predisposed by nature to compare, to look at the other, to look at that woman who's online and to say, oh, she's got the best holiday, she's got the best family with the perfect 3 kids, which really none of us have. The reality is none of us look curated at night time when we're dealing with the difficult problems. The most difficult problems in the world are in our household, right? We face them every day. Some of this is the tech. When the kids are playing video games on their phones, listening to you passively when they should be doing homework. Well, you can play games, there's nothing wrong. Do your homework first. And it's always been constantly reaffirming and positive reinforcement. You can't tell a child, switch off your computer, switch off your telephone. It doesn't work. You've got to be positive about how you approach the child. You've got to whisper in their ears daily in a positive way. You're doing so well. How about trying this? And model the behaviour as parents, because often we are the worst offenders. When babies pick up a frame and start doing this,
Or a magazine.
or when they get their fake mobile phone, which the parent has bought at the toy shop for 2 cents, and start pacing up and down the hallway, acting like you because you're always on the phone like I am, right? What's this? What are we showing? So these are just some very basic, I have papers written on this with peers who are psychologists, but please don't think I'm giving you the end solution. The most important thing to remember is that we're all responsible for this behaviour, that it is addiction by design at times. There are people in the audience like Sky, who's an economist, studying to be an economist and a mathematician, who was talking to me about behavioural economics. And I said to her, we can build persuasive technologies. We can design tech for good in the app so that the app says, that's enough for today because I've known you've reached your limit as a 16-year-old. Age-appropriate services, I'm creating a standard for that for IEEE at the moment. Are you 12? Are you 14? Are you 3, 6, 9? At 3, there should be no screen time. At 6, there should be this. At 9, there should be this. Just as ballpark guidelines. But when our own social media companies are saying that at 13, you're an adult, and there is no check for you to subscribe and hop online, you could be 6 with a Facebook account. We have to be responsible in a way we innovate. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of strategies, there are lots of challenges, but the good news is we are creating young people like students who are coming out like Sky, like Leah and Sarah in the audience who want to build the great technologies that we're all going to say, finally, we have something good in society where we can self-regulate and where there's media literacy embedded in our curriculum. Why is it that we learn maths, English, and we don't learn about the biggest thing, this? Our little ones should be learning about the power of this. How can we exploit this for collaboration, for good things, for innovation, and how can we leave those drawbacks with the young kids, particularly while their brains are forming?
Do we have another question from the audience?
So I'm curious about this experience of looking at each other in the eyes. And then we've done it, have a background in theater, and we used to do it in theater all the time to try to get, to get intimate with our cast members. But it is always deeply uncomfortable. So I was just wondering if you had any information about why it is so uncomfortable.
It's yours. No, I was going to say something. I really appreciate what you said about the positive reinforcement with technology and the kids, because occasionally my girlfriend and I are nagging each other. You're always on your phone. We're together. I'm always on my phone. And then every once in a while, you're talking for an hour. Where's my phone at? Oh, this was wonderful to have lost my phone for an hour, and we're just lost in that. And that is so much more powerful than being on each other about how much you want.
Just before we talk about why looking in the eyes is so awkward, there's an app that I have called Forest. I'm embarrassed at how incredibly effective it is. I grow little trees.
It's amazing.
And then if
It's
I get on my phone, the
amazing.
little tree wilts.
And it
for some
dies.
reason,
That's awesome.
I've been using this for a year, and there's like new little trees. And then if you have a partner, you guys can both grow a little tree
Together.
And Jeffrey's
decide
convinced
how
that these
long
things
they
are
grow for.
more like effective for women. He's like, I don't care about your little trees. I'm like, can you get on Google Maps and see where we're going? I'm growing a tree right now. Let's grow your tree.
The longer you're on your phone, the less good
So
it is to
you
tree.
grow a better tree, and then you have to spend you decide how long you're going to be on there, 2 hours, and then
That's awesome.
it's so silly. But I'm really obsessed with this, and that's actually really reduced my screen time. But I'll just say about looking in the eyes, isn't it like a threat? It's a threatening gesture to look directly in the eyes of a stranger. It's like a dominance display if you're not quite familiar with each other.
That's a very interesting thing. I look at it from various lenses, particularly in cultural settings. I taught predominantly Asian and Indian students in Australia, particularly in the master's courses of computing, and they will never look at you in the face. They may come right up to your nose because it's a cultural thing, but they will not look at you in the eyes. This feeling of I'm watching you, but also it's disrespectful. It's a sign of disrespect to look in people's eyes, usually in particular cultures. I do recall going to a class at a time that we were having difficulty having kids, and we were going through an adoption course. It was run by the Department of Community Services, and we had a speaker come in talking to us about the fact that we were doing inter-country adoption, and we had chosen China, and that the majority of children, particularly female, whom are abandoned more than males in China because of the one-child policy before 2012, would have some kind of cognitive delay. And this was discussed by a sociologist and also psychologists in the room, that one of the reasons the cognitive delay happens is because we don't look at each other's eyes. And so when there was one carer for 400 female babies in orphanages, how much sight is someone going to get? How much love is someone going to get? How much attachment? And so when you're going through parenting courses, you're taught attachment and feed the child closely, even if you can't breastfeed and you don't have the milk coming through for whatever reason, or you can't because of other life choices. Keep the baby close and feed close so that it feels loved. And someone said cuddles. I think it was you, Carlo. But that's what actually, talking about the trees, we say it in Greek, dendra and triandafila that sprout, that come up from the soil. That's our kids, that's our babies. They're coming from a seed inside of us, but they're sprouting up because we love them and we cuddle them and we teach them bond and reassurance, and the eye contact helps them.
And we
to
stay
live.
off our phones enough to
Yes,
to grow them.
It's not like cuddle like this, right? Which is often the tragedy. But listen to this one, and we challenged this in the audience. They told us children in China had died as a result of a lack of eye contact, and we all went, no, yeah. It made sense. If you don't look at someone, it means you're not feeding them. It means you're not clothing them. And we are all, I will tell you now, not a single one of us in this room has been not complicit to taking this first beyond the child or beyond the partner or beyond the person who's in desperate need of us, because we think just another line. And I can tell you, every time it's happened to me, my heart breaks because I think, darn it, I research on this stuff. And I can't do it. And so what do? A documentary we did on In My Mind, it was called Social Obsession. The couple that was in the documentary, one of the 3 case studies, left this at home because that was the only way they were going to detach, and they drove as far away as they could from their house so they would look at each other at the beach and not on the phone. And that's online. You can see that documentary. It's extreme, but...
One thing I'll say is that Jack Dorsey, the head of Twitter, went on a Vipassana retreat for 10 days. And when you go on Vipassana, and I've been on 3 Vipassana retreats, you're not allowed to be on your phone, you're not allowed to write or read, you're not allowed to speak. And it's amazing how deeply you can think about stuff. Sometimes silly stuff. I wrote a whole stand-up routine once, and then I lost it because you're not allowed to write. So there's so many things that you can think about. And Cal Newport is this guy who wrote Deep Work. I think Deep Work is an interesting book, but it doesn't really tell you how to get to deep work. It just says if you're carrying your phone around with you all the time, if you have this brain candy, if you have brain candy all the time with you, then you're actually not going to be reaching for those more satisfying, brain meals potentially. So it's like all that proximate kind of reinforcement that you're experiencing, and it's really hard for me. I made a rule that not to use my phone or iPad in bed, and it got broken in the last 2 weeks, and I have to start that again. You just always have to, use the same way you were with your kids, rewarding with them. I could be like, I am a failure, but I'm not a failure. I have to get back into this rule.
Great. Any final thoughts from our guests, things that you want to share about love and how love, the zombification of love, either can be a good thing or a bad thing, things that people should take with them from this episode? Jessica, do you have anything?
I don't know. I think it's a good thing to be zombified by love, because I don't think people actually like each other enough if they're not zombified by love to actually stand each other. So,
not cynical at all.
Beware of self-deception in love and life. I deleted my Twitter several months ago, and then, feeling great, re-downloaded to make a work Twitter, and now I don't get off it because I'd hate for my career to suffer.
Undead Love. I came with telling you there's no such thing as the dead. We're all living, even those who have passed on.
I will just say that evolution made us such that we focus our attentions and efforts on a person, usually to raise offspring, and then we also focus our attention. We fall in love with our babies, we fall in love with our children, we fall in love with each other, and you can have a cynical view of what that's about, and a cynical view of how we are zombifying each other, and still find the beauty in that. You have a more realistic view of it. People always say, Diana, you have this incredibly cynical view about human nature and how people interact. Doesn't that make everything, lose its luster for you? No, not at all, because I see the beauty in the feeling, and I also see the beauty in the design of the feeling.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing your brains with us for this episode of Zombified.
And if the whole world says that we're cool, we don't need nobody anyhow. But if you don't wanna fall in love, you better tell me right now. And if the whole world says that we're cool,
Arizona State University, and the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Alliance. Thank you to the Department of Psychology, to the Interdisciplinary Cooperation Initiative and the President's Office at ASU, to the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics, and thank you to all of the brains that help make this podcast. Tall Rom, who does our sound, Neil Smith, our amazing illustrator, Lemmy, the creator of the song Psychological, and our Z team of graduate students, undergraduates, postdocs who help make the Zombified podcast happen. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are Zombified Pod, and on Facebook, we're Zombified Podcast. You can also support us on Patreon. We are all educational, no ads, except for this one right now, to go on Patreon and support us. Thank you all for listening to Zombified, your source for fresh brains.
It's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.